If you've ever sat with a family member before a procedure, waiting for a doctor to walk through the door, you'll know that your mind is really on paperwork. It's on the person sitting next to you. But here's the reality that many South Africans only face after the fact. Having a medical scheme doesn't always mean that your costs are fully covered. There can be a gap, a significant one, between what your medical scheme pays and what your healthcare provider covers. Welcome back to Unlocking the Private Health Insurance Conversation. Today we're talking about gap cover, what it is, why it exists, and why understanding it will give you one less thing to worry about when it matters most. My guest today is Aleesha Reddy, General Manager for Product and Pricing at Netcare. Aleesha works at the intersection of healthcare and financial planning, and she's somebody who understands that this conversation is not just professional, it's deeply personal. Aleesha, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's get right into it, Aleesha. There is genuine confusion about the term gap cover. It's a term that's used a lot, but many people don't understand what it actually means. In the simplest terms, can you explain to us what gap cover is and why it exists?
So, before I explain what gap cover is, let me explain a little bit about how medical schemes operate. So, medical schemes operate on the basis of community pricing, which means that everybody in the medical scheme needs to pay the same rate. So, this is irrespective of your age or your health status.
Okay.
So, what happens in theory is that the younger and healthy members offset the costs for the older and less healthy members. So, over time, the medical scheme would want to attract as many young people and healthy people to the scheme to keep this balance going. The only way they can do this is by keeping premiums at affordable levels, which means benefit cuts, right? So, over time, schemes have had to apply benefit limitations and they've had to limit the amounts that they pay to providers to ensure that premiums remain at affordable levels.
Okay.
So, this has resulted in significant out of pocket expenses for members. So, gap cover is an insurance product that has been designed to cover the shortfalls that are incurred as a result of the benefit limitations that exist within the medical scheme.
Now, can you walk us through how medical scheme tariffs work? A lot of people assume that when you're on a medical scheme, their bills are taken care of. Where does that assumption sometimes fall short?
So, medical schemes create networks of providers and hospitals. So, when they create these networks, they negotiate the price with the providers and the hospitals. So, if somebody sticks within this network, then they are shielded from any shortfalls it cover. However, there are circumstances when someone will choose to use a provider outside of the network. It could be that they were referred by a GP or that they were referred by a trusted family member or a friend. So, if a person uses a provider outside of the network, the medical scheme doesn't have any control over how much that provider can charge. So, they apply a maximum amount that they will pay towards that bill. So, that is basically your medical scheme tariff. So, this is known as the medical scheme tariff. So, the medical scheme tariff depends on the option that you're on, and you get different levels of cover. So, you could get 100% of cover or 200% of cover. So, to make it practical, let's say you're going for a specialist consult. The cost of a specialist consult that the scheme covers is 500 Rand. If you're on 100% cover, the scheme will cover 500. But if the specialist charges 2,000 Rand, you'll be in for a shortfall of 1,500. If your scheme covers 200%, it means that the specialist consult will be covered up to 1,000. But again, if the specialist charges 2,000, then you're in for a shortfall of 1,000.
That's quite helpful. Thank you for making that real for us.
Okay.
Now, the question I have is this something that affects a specific type of medical scheme member, or is this a consideration for anyone who's on a plan, regardless of their level of cover?
Yeah, so gap cover works for anybody on any medical scheme. Those that are on the lower options will typically experience more shortfalls and probably have a greater need for this cover. But the reality is that even on your most comprehensive medical scheme options, you have a limit of 300% of the medical scheme tariff. But of course, a provider can charge 400%, 500%, 600%, and then you have to cover that shortfall. So having gap cover will definitely be useful. Another trend that we are seeing is that co-payments are becoming more prevalent among the more comprehensive options. So, for those who don't know what co-payments are, this is basically a predefined amount that your medical scheme can charge you. So, this can be a set rand amount, or it can be a percentage of your admission. So, typically, this could be 10,000 rand, or it can be up to 30% of your admission cost, which that can run into quite a large bill.
Why are they charging this co-payment?
So it's for so it's again to contain the cost, right? So they've negotiated costs with the hospitals. So there's hospitals that have agreed to charge specific tariffs, and if you go to a hospital that's not on your network, then the scheme will impose a co-payment for using that hospital.
And will everyone be charged the same co-payment?
Yes.
Can you paint a picture where gap cover becomes particularly necessary? So can you give us an example or a common scenario that any member might encounter?
Yeah, so can I give you a few examples?
Please, yes.
Okay. So the most common example we see is for in-hospital procedures and surgeries that are done. I think most people don't realize that when you have a surgery, there's typically multiple specialists that are involved.
That's right.
If you think about having a cesarean section, you need a gynecologist, a pediatrician, and an anesthetist. And if all three of those providers are not on your network, then you're going to be left with a large shortfall. In addition to that, after you've had a surgery, you need a specialist to check up on you on a daily basis. So each time the specialist checks up on you, there will be a bill. And if that specialist is not on your network, you could be again left with a shortfall. We also see that gap cover becomes particularly relevant for helping people cover their day-to-day healthcare expenses. So as we know, most people run out of their savings account by July, right?
Guilty as charged?
Yes. So I'll give you a practical scenario of how this could play out. Someone goes to see a GP, they've got severe headaches, right? So the GP could say, I need to send you for blood tests. I need to send you for some specialized radiology. I need to send you to the specialist. So now this can become quite a large bill. And then in the absence of gap cover, what do? You either have to fork out that money by yourself, or you wait until the next year when you have benefits again to get the treatment that you need. So gap cover basically allows you to get the treatment that you need when you need it the most. And then the third most common scenario is the co-payments that we've touched on. So in addition to the hospital co-payments that are applied, there are co-payments for certain procedures that may be applied. So members would have to cover that.
The examples that you've given me show that gap cover has a place both in hospital and out of hospital. Is that right?
Correct.
You've given examples of planned procedures, of specialist care, of hospitalization, where gap cover can become beneficial.
Yes.
What should a person be asking if they are going in for these procedures?
Yeah, so firstly, you need to check if the hospital you are going to is on your medical scheme network. If it's not on your medical scheme network, you are going to have to pay a co-payment upfront. And this co-payment needs to be paid even before the procedure is done. So when you arrive at the hospital, make sure you have those funds available to pay. Then secondly, like I've mentioned, there's typically scopes and scans. They also attract co-payments, so people need to be prepared to pay for that. From a specialist perspective, you need to check if your specialist is on your network. If your specialist is on your network, then you'll be shielded from the co-payments. If the specialist is not on the network, then you need to ask the specialist. You need to ask the specialist for a quote. And I know most people are afraid to discuss cost with doctors. It's a bit sensitive, but it is well within your rights to discuss this cost. And if it's something that you can't afford, you're also allowed to negotiate that cost down. And then lastly, you need to look at the type of procedure you have. So some medical aids have a maximum limit that they will pay for certain procedure. So something like a hip replacement or joint replacement, the medical aid may only cover 150, up to 150,000. So you need to check that your procedure cost is going to come in below that amount, because you don't want to be left with that shortfall afterwards.
That's quite helpful. I don't know that many people know that these are the questions that need to be asked.
Yes.
What would you say to somebody who feels adequately covered and hasn't really looked into this?
So what we find is that most people buy gap cover after they are diagnosed with a new condition. And this doesn't help because there are waiting periods that are built into gap cover products. So you'll have to wait until these waiting periods are over before you can start claiming. Then there are people who, they're healthy, they don't have any foreseeable health events coming up, so they feel that they don't need gap cover. However, we have seen that the cost for gap cover can run into the tens of thousands of rand. So you'd rather give yourself that certainty and pay that few hundred rand a month towards gap cover instead of trying to cover those costs as and when they arise.
How does NetcarePlus GapCare specifically address the shortfall between the medical scheme tariffs and the specialist billing? And maybe more importantly, what does the member experience differently when they have it in place?
Yes. So when gap cover started about maybe 20 years ago, that was the focus of gap cover. It was to cover that in hospital
Mm.
specialist shortfall. But over time, the benefits that medical scheme covers has changed. So we've taken a more holistic approach in designing our gap cover product. So we look at all the potential gaps that people could encounter, and we provide protection for. You can't say every single gap, but we try to provide protection for as many gaps as we possibly can. So the difference with the Netcare Plus product, like I've mentioned, it doesn't only cover you for in-hospital shortfalls, it also covers you for out-of-hospital shortfalls once you've run out of your savings or depleted your day-to-day limits. Another good benefit that we have is that we will cover you in an emergency department if you experience an illness, a sudden illness or a sudden injury, and you can't get to your GP. Um, and yeah, and then the other benefit that we have that's quite, quite popular in market is that you have unlimited cover for co-payments at a Netcare hospital. So the first advantage of this is that, you can go to Netcare as many times as you need to go. You immediately get access to all 53 Netcare hospitals, and you get access to the specialists that are practicing at our hospitals. And there's over 2,000 specialists that practice at our hospitals. And then we find a shortcoming in market, typically in market, is that the other gap cover providers will only allow you to have one non-network hospital visit per year. So if you need to go to a hospital multiple times in the year, you're not fully protected against those co-payments. Yeah, so look, those are on the benefits, and I can talk about the benefits a lot because that's what I do every day. But I think where the product comes is alive for people is when it comes to claim stage. So we've simplified our claims processes quite a lot. People can submit a claim digitally on our website or on our app within minutes. We also offer a service where we can refund the providers directly, so members don't have to pay out of pocket and then try to claim back from us. So they don't have that.
Which can become quite complicated.
Yes, so they don't have that financial burden.
Mm.
Yes.
You spoke a lot about the product, and it's quite clear that you're very passionate about the difference that this product can make.
Yes.
And so, from a product perspective, what were the key pain points that you were trying to solve for when you developed this offering? And again, going back to the member, how did the real member experience influence or shape this product?
So firstly, we wanted to give members choice. So we wanted them to be able to choose whichever provider they wanted to choose, irrespective of irrespective of the providers that's on their medical scheme network. When you're going on a healthcare journey, you want to be able to use a provider that you feel comfortable with. Secondly, we wanted to enable people to get the healthcare that they need when they need it. So that goes back to my example of, when you've run out of savings and you need treatment, what do you do?
That's important.
Yes. So in terms of real member experiences, there are multiple benefits that have been shaped by real member experiences, but I'll touch on a few examples. So firstly, on our mental health offering. So if you speak to mental health patients, especially those who are trying to overcome a drug or alcohol addiction, they will tell you that first 2 weeks in rehab is spent, just trying to overcome that addiction. And then you're left with a very short time. The medical scheme only gives you 21 days. So you're left with a very short time after that to get the counseling that you need. So we've added an extra 5 days to mental health stays. So people in total can get up to 26 days versus the 21 days that medical scheme offers.
That's very meaningful.
Yes. And then from a maternity perspective, having a new baby, it's the most exciting time and it's an emotional time. You don't want to be thinking about, medical expenses. So there again, we've designed our product to help people with their shortfalls during the pregnancy, during the childbirth, and even after the baby is born. And then lastly, I'll just touch on the comprehensiveness of our product offering. So there's probably about 70 odd gap cover options in market. Not all of them are designed equally. But I think my biggest problem with some of them is that it's missing key benefits. For example, there's some products that don't offer cancer cover. And we've deliberately designed our benefits in a comprehensive way. So, people are not left feeling short, not short of benefits when it comes time to claim.
We've spoken a lot about preparedness, and preparedness is such a central theme when it comes to this series specifically. How does having gap cover in place before you need it change one's experience of going through a medical event and for the family as well?
Yes. So healthcare is subjective, right? The treatment plans for a specific procedure can be subjective. On the one hand, you could have the medical aid saying, this is a treatment plan we are willing to cover for whatever condition you have. And on the other hand, you could have the doctor that says, this is what I feel is the best for you, but then your medical aid doesn't cover the procedure in full. A common example that we see is treatment for cancer. It's called Keytruda. So the cost of this treatment can exceed R1 million. Medical schemes typically apply co-payments on this, and these co-payments can be between 25% and 50% of the cost. It's shocking.
Hundreds of thousands.
Yes. Yeah, so again, I think our gap cover gives you that opportunity to choose the treatment plan that you feel that will work best for you and give you the best possible health outcomes.
For somebody who's weighing up if gap cover is necessary to add to their medical scheme, what are the most important factors that they should be considering?
So, firstly, I think everyone out there needs to go and research their medical scheme option. Find out what are the co-payments that exist. Find out what your cover level is. Find out what limits exist on the procedures that you would need. You then need to look at your own personal savings, right? And the reason that you have these personal savings. I don't think anybody would want to, deplete their savings for a new car or a new house, because they've incurred a large medical expense shortfall. And we know this could have been avoided had they taken out gap cover. Secondly, you need to look at your family history of conditions. So if there is a condition that's prevalent in your family, there is a risk that you will contract this over time. And to ensure that you are comprehensively covered, you should try to boost your medical scheme cover with a gap cover. And then lastly, I would say you also need to look at your dependents that you're covering on your medical aid. So different dependents come with different needs. So younger children, they probably have greater needs when it comes to day-to-day healthcare costs. So for dental visits and vaccinations and visits to the pediatrician. The older members, they may require longer stays in hospital due to complications or due to underlying procedures, and they may require more specialist care for some of the conditions that they have. So if you are someone that's covering multiple people with multiple healthcare needs, your healthcare shortfalls can escalate quite quickly. So you need to you should consider taking up a gap cover.
Aleesha, this isn't just about numbers and about policy structure. At its heart, really, it's about people navigating some of the most stressful moments in their lives. How do you hold on to that human element?
So we are fortunate that by being part of the Netcare group, we have firsthand exposure to the real experiences that patients and their families have to navigate when going on their healthcare journey. And I think the thing that we're very cognizant about is that behind every claim, there's a person who is experiencing a significant health event. So we continuously look at ways to improve our product, improve our processes, and give patients peace of mind during a time that is already very stressful. So yes, the numbers are important. It helps us price the product. It helps us ensure that the product is sustainable. But at the heart of it, our product is shaped by the experiences of our patients.
Absolutely. The key message around gap cover is removing distraction so that when someone is caring for a person that they love, they can be truly present. Can you speak to why that peace of mind is just as important as financial protection?
Yes. So when someone experiences a health care event, it extends far beyond just that patient, right? The family has to get involved. They might have to help the patient manage their medication, drive them to follow up appointments, help them adhere to whatever treatment plans they've been given. So having a financial, worrying about a financial burden at this time can be very distracting. And the ultimate goal during this time should be on providing emotional support to your family member, um, as well as ensuring that they have the best possible healthcare outcomes and as well speed up their recovery. So I think the peace of mind that we've built into Netcare Plus Gap Cover is as valuable as the financial protection that we offer.
Absolutely. Aleesha, thank you very much. This has been such a valuable conversation. And I think what stands out to me is quite simple. Being prepared doesn't necessarily mean preparing for the worst. It really is about being free to focus on what actually matters when the time comes.
Yes, for sure.
If today has prompted you to take a closer look at your own cover, or to ask your medical scheme questions you have been putting off, that's a good first step. You'll find more information on the Netcare Plus Gap Cover in the links below. We'll be back soon with another episode of Unlocking the Private Health Insurance Conversation. Until then, take care and take care of the people you love.